Welcome to Rustler's Reminiscence, stories of hope, faith, and frontier courage. Let the journey unfold. I came to the mountains to disappear. After the war, after the graves, after the bottles stopped numbing me, I left. Left what was left of my name, my reputation, my purpose. A man doesn't survive certain losses. He just lingers like smoke from a fire that's already burned out. It was a Tuesday when I found her. The wind had shifted strangely that day, carried a scent that didn't belong, not pine or elk or rot, but something human and fresh. I was walking back to my cabin after checking the traps when I saw her silhouette swinging. At first, I thought it was a hallucination. Too much moonshine, too many memories clawing back up. But it wasn't a woman. Hung from the thick roof beam of my porch. Feet bare, hair long and golden like a memory from a life I never had. Her dress was torn, blood-stained, and soaked from the storm the night before. Her neck bent at a wrong angle, rope digging into her flesh, except she moved. A twitch, a gasp. Her legs trembled once. She was alive. I dropped everything and ran. Cut her down so fast I nearly took her head clean off. She hit the dirt with a sickening thud. I thought I was too late. Then she wheezed. "Stay with me," I muttered, already pulling my coat off to wrap her. Her skin was ice, her lips pale, blue. I could see rope burns across her throat and wrists, old and new. Her breath rattled like a wounded animal's. I was about to lift her when I heard it. Gunshots. Cracked through the trees, just beyond the ridge, close. My heart, that dead, cold organ in my chest, jolted alive. Someone had done this, and someone knew she hadn't died. I didn't hesitate. Grabbed my rifle with one arm, her with the other. No saddle, no prep. Just raw instinct and the ghost of the soldier I swore I'd buried back in Virginia. My horse bucked hard when I threw her over, but I calmed him fast. I whispered to him like I used to my boy when the nightmares came. Easy now, easy. We got her, we ride, and we did. I rode hard and fast into the high hills, where no sane man goes unless he's ready to die. She never spoke, didn't move. I wasn't sure she could. I wasn't sure she wanted to. I set up a camp beneath a rock. Overhang I used once during a blizzard years ago. It wasn't much, but it would keep her warm. I wrapped her in every fur I had and lit the fire so close it nearly burned my boots. I sat by her all night, watching the rise and fall of her chest. I didn't ask who she was. Didn't ask what she'd done. All I knew was someone had tried to hang her from my roof, and someone was still out there. With a loaded gun, angry she lived. The part of me that used to care about staying hidden started to slip, because even if I didn't know her name, something in her silence reminded me of my wife's last breath, of the way my daughter had looked, up at me, trusting me to protect her. I failed them both. I wouldn't fail this woman. Not again. She woke screaming. It was just before dawn. The fire had died down to coals, and the sky was turning the color of an old bruise. Her eyes shot open, wild and glassy, and she thrashed so hard she knocked over the tin cup of water I'd placed near her head. "No, no, 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 please," she cried, backing away like a cornered animal. I held my hands up. "You're safe," I said, my voice lower than I meant. "Ain't no one gonna hurt you here." But she didn't hear me. She reached for something. A weapon, maybe, and found my old hunting knife where I'd left it by the fire. Before I could move, she pressed the blade to her own neck. My gut turned cold. "Put it down," I said, kneeling slowly. "Please." "I should have died," she whispered. "They meant for me to die." She started to push, just enough to break the skin. I saw the blood bead at her throat. I've buried enough people, I said, inching closer. Don't make me bury another. Her hand trembled. She looked at me like she was seeing a ghost. Then, finally, she dropped the knife. I caught it. Before it hit the ground, she collapsed into herself, sobbing without sound. Her shoulders shook like a tree in a storm, and I realized this wasn't just grief. It was shame. So much of it, it filled the whole cave. I gave her my coat again. She clutched it like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to the world. We didn't speak for hours. Later, when the sun had risen and she could sit up, I boiled beans and broth over the fire. She didn't eat at first, just stared into the flames like they were telling her something. My name's Robert, I finally said. She nodded, slow. Then she spoke. Annabbeth. Her voice cracked like dry timber, but it was the last name that stopped me cold. Cwley, she said. Annabbeth Cwley. That name crashed through me like a bullet. Cwley. General Nathaniel Cwley, Confederate butcher turned land baron, the man who raised Dustwater, the man who burned homes for sport, the man who ordered the raid that killed my wife and my child, the man whose face I'd sworn to never forget, so I could hate it forever, his daughter, the girl I'd heard whispers about, the golden girl, raised on blood money, who vanished after the war and was presumed dead, and now she was here, at my cabin, hung from my roof like a warning. I stood up too fast. The world tilted. She noticed. You know who I am, she said, eyes dim. Low. Ahead. Say it. IDN single quotes T. Instead, I stared at her, trying to find some trace of him in her, some cruelty, some coldness, something that could justify what I was feeling. But there was nothing. Just a broken girl with rope burns and a look in her eyes I knew too well. I'm not him, she said quietly, but I carry him. She turned away, as if bracing for me to strike her. Instead, I grabbed the knife and tossed it into the fire. You're not dying today, I said. Not on my watch. Her lip quivered. Why? She asked. After what he did to you. Because I swore I'd never kill again. And because the only thing worse than your father is becoming him. She looked at me like I'd cracked some part of her shell. Neither of us spoke again that day. But I stayed by her side, and I meant it. She wasn't dying here. Not even if it killed me. She wouldn't sleep indoors. COULDN single quotes T, really. Every time she stepped toward the cabin, her legs locked up, her eyes darted to the rafters, to the beam she'd been hung from, like it might come alive and grab her by the throat again. So I built her something else. It took me 2 days, and the last of my good lumber, but I didn't care. I used an old shed foundation I'd once planned to turn into a smokehouse, laid down a thick layer of pine boughs, carved a cot out of juniper, strung a canvas tarp over the top, and dug a trench around the perimeter in case the rain came. Even planted a small row of potatoes and carrots just outside, where the soil was softest. It wasn't much, but it was hers. I told her she didn't have to move in until she was ready. She didn't say anything, just nodded once and kept her eyes on the fire. The next morning, I caught her standing outside it, barefoot in the dew. She walked the perimeter, slow fingers tracing the rough wood of the posts, the curved stones around the fire pit, the way the wildflowers I'd placed in an old tin cup tilted toward the sun. When she cried, she didn't make a sound, but her shoulders told the story. I stayed back, gave her distance. There was a time I would have stepped in, tried to fix things with words, but the war taught me that silence can be a form of respect. Sometimes the best thing a man can do is simply not leave. Later that evening she moved in without a word, started sweeping the dirt floor like it was a palace, humming softly off-key but real as she stacked firewood, arranged a few belongings I'd given her, a quilt, a pot, a battered old copy of the Pilgrim's Progress. She even lit her own fire that night. I watched her from the ridge, pretending to be on patrol. Truth was, I just wanted to see her silhouette, sitting by the flames, alive, choosing to be. When I brought her stew, she took the bowl with both hands like it was holy. "You're the first person who's ever given me a place without wanting something for it," she said. "You don't owe me a thing," I replied. She looked away, but her lip quivered like it was trying to hold back 1,000 words. Then she did something I wasn't expecting. She laughed. It was small, dry, little bitter. "I used to think the only thing I was good for was being used," she said. "Father taught me that. Men reinforced it. Even when I ran, even when I tried to disappear, someone always found me, branded me with his sins, decided what I was worth." Her eyes found mine in the firelight. "You didn't." I didn't know what to say, so I sat down beside her, shared the heat, and stared into the flames like we were both looking for something buried in them. "I ain't no saint," I muttered. "I've done things, watched worse. I didn't save you to feel better about myself." She nodded slowly. "Then why?" I looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Because maybe if I save someone else, I'll stop hating myself for who I couldn't." The wind moved through the trees above us. No gunshots. No boots. No breath but our own. She reached out and rested her hand, tentative, featherlight, over mine. "I want to live," she whispered. I swallowed hard. "Then we start from there." The peace didn't last. It never does. I was chopping wood when he showed up, Eli Harper, a half-drunk traitor and full-time coward who sold bullets to both sides during the war. He only came this high, into the mountains, when he was hiding something, or carrying news too ugly for town ears. He didn't even get off his horse. "Boone?" he called out, voice gravel thick. "I need a word." I wiped sweat from my brow and walked toward him slowly. He looked nervous, like a man who knows he's about to trade a bit of truth for a lot of regret. "You harboring a woman?" he asked. My eyes narrowed. "What's it to you?" He looked down, spat, wouldn't meet my gaze. "Heard some things about Clayton Riek. He's down in Dustwater with 5 riders, asking about a blonde girl. Claims she ran off with stolen documents. Claims she's mad, dangerous." My chest tightened. "And he knows I'm out here?" Eli nodded. "He said if you're sheltering her, there'll be consequences." I took a step closer, voice low. "He's bluffing." "No, Boone, he ain't." Eli reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a folded piece of paper, threw it at my feet like it was poison. A bounty poster, $200 for the return of Annabbeth Cwley, dead or alive. I stared at her sketch. The likeness was cruel, exaggerated, painted with lies, thief, traitor, seductress, dangerous. "He said if she's found up here," Eli added, "they'll call it aiding a fugitive. You'll swing, too." I said nothing, just picked up the paper, crumpled it, and threw it in the fire. Eli didn't argue, just turned his horse around and disappeared down the trail. Annabbeth had been watching. She didn't say a word until after dark. When I came back from checking the traps, "I'm leaving," she said. Her things, the few she had, were already packed. "No," I told her. "You don't get to decide. I'm not letting you die for something you didn't do." Her voice cracked. "It's not about dying. It's about you dying because of me." "You think I haven't already died?" I stepped closer. "You think I came up here just to split wood and rot slowly?" She turned away. "I lost everything, Annabbeth, my wife, my daughter, my soul. I stayed alive out of spite. But you made me remember what it feels like to want something again." Her breath hitched. "I can't ask you to fight for me," she whispered. "You're not asking," I said. "I'm offering." That's when she told me everything. How her father's men had turned on her when she tried to expose the land seizures. How she'd taken his ledgers, proof of bribes, forced removals, hangings without trial. How she'd tried to run. And how Clayton Rieck, her father's right hand, found her before she could reach anyone. She paused. "He told me if I spoke, I'd hang just like the others. And he was right," she added bitterly. I reached out and touched her face. "He didn't finish the job." She closed her eyes. "I thought I'd never find someone who didn't see me as a curse. I see someone worth fighting for." We stood like that a long time. The wind moved through the trees. Somewhere far off, a coyote cried out. Then she said it. "I won't run any more." "Good," I replied, "because I've already started digging the traps." She looked up, surprised. "What?" "If Clayton wants to ride into these woods," I said, "he'd best come prepared to meet ghosts." Her lips curled into something, almost like a smile. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were preparing to stand together. They came at dawn. 5 riders. Black coats, wide-brimmed hats, rifles over their shoulders. Clayton Rieck led them, a tall, wolf-lean man with a crooked jaw and a scar that sliced his left brow in half. I recognized him from years back, when he'd stormed Dustwater with the same sneer he wore now. Annabbeth and I watched from the ridge. She lay beside me, face painted with ash, rifle cradled in her lap. Her breath was steady. We'd spent the night laying traps, tripwires, pitfalls, deadfalls with sharpened stakes. I'd rigged a hollow log with black powder and placed it near the creek crossing. It wouldn't kill them, but it had rattled their bones enough to slow them down. "They'll split up," I murmured. "They'll want to flank. I'll cover." "The west trail," she said. "You sure?" She didn't answer. Just pulled the bandana over her mouth and slid into the brush like a ghost. I hadn't planned to let her fight. But when I saw how calm she was, how sure, I understood. She wasn't doing this for me, she was doing this for her. The first trap went off with a deafening crack. A rider's horse reared and threw him straight into a snare. His leg caught. High in the air, rifle lost. I watched from above as he dangled, screaming for help. They didn't stop for him. Clayton barked orders and pushed his men deeper. I took my shot, not to kill, but to disarm. Hit one man's rifle square out of his hands. He dove for cover, panicking. That's when the fire started. At first, I thought the sun had risen faster than usual. But then I smelled the smoke. I turned and saw the trees behind Clayton's crew ablaze, a line of flames crackling up from the ridge. Annabbeth. She'd lit the oil-soaked moss I'd stashed the night before. I knew what it meant. She was cutting off their escape route. And ours. Panic twisted in my gut, but I stayed calm. Fire in these woods moved fast, but not faster than us. Not if we ran now. Clayton wasn't giving up. I spotted him weaving between the trees, flanking wide, heading toward the cave. Toward her. I didn't think. I moved. Dropped low, ran like hell, dodged falling ash and flinching deer. My boots slid in pine needles. I fired once, twice, missed, then tackled him before he could crest the final ridge. We rolled, fists swinging, choking on smoke. "You think she's worth dying for?" He snarled, bloody teeth flashing. "I think she's worth living for." I spat. He tried to reach for his sidearm, but I cracked his wrist with a rock. He screamed, then choked as I knocked the wind out of him. I didn't kill him. I should have. But something in me, something old and tired, chose restraint. When I stood, I looked down at him and said, Tell Cwley she's not his anymore." Then I left him coughing in the dirt. I found her near the river bend, face streaked with soot, eyes wild. "I thought I lost you," she said. "You almost did." We didn't go back to the cabin. The fire had cut off the lower trail. So we ran until our legs gave out, and we collapsed inside a cave I'd used years ago to hide from a blizzard. We sat in the dark, breathing heavy, skin smeared with ash and sweat. Her fingers found mine. "We're alive," she whispered. "For now," I said. "No," she said firmer. "Not just alive, we fought." I looked at her, really looked, and saw someone who had chosen, finally, to live. Not run. Not hide. Live. I nodded. Together, soot-covered and half-broken, we had survived the fire, and in some strange way, the fire had burned something out of us, the last of the fear, the shame, the silence. What was left was something new. Maybe even whole. The town of Dustwater hadn't changed much since the war. Same cracked saloon door. Same rusting church bell leaning sideways on the hill. Same men gathered on the porch of the general store, staring like they'd forgotten how to blink. Annabbeth rode beside me, dressed in a faded green blouse and a wide hat pulled low. Her face was cleaner now, but the scars on her neck told their own story. We'd hidden for 3 weeks after the fire. Let the smoke die down, let the whispers settle. Then we came here, not to run, not to hide, to speak. We brought a saddlebag, full of ledgers, maps, letters, all taken from her father's cabin before she ran. Inside were records of land thefts, names of native elders marked for removal, towns bribed into silence, and at the bottom proof of Riek's bounty order. We weren't asking for sympathy, we were here for the truth. Sheriff Cwley met us outside the old jailhouse. He was a slow-talking man with a belly like a wine barrel and hands that had held too many secrets. "You're causing a stir," he said to me. "Bringing her here. She has something to say." He looked at her. His eyes narrowed. "I know who you are." "I know," she said. "But I think you've forgotten who he was." We walked into the town square. It didn't take long for a crowd to form. Farmers, shopkeepers, the preacher. Even a few of the town's children hovered at the edge, drawn by the tension. I took the stage at the back of the boarding house, but I didn't speak. Annabbeth did. She opened the satchel and pulled out one document at a time, explaining what they meant. Names of displaced families, dates of false trials, her father's signature, on an order to burn Dustwater when it refused to give up its land claim. And then she stopped. Silent. She looked out at the crowd. Her hands trembled. They weren't listening anymore. They were watching her, judging her, fearing her, maybe even hating her. That's when she did it. Without a word, she unbuttoned the back of her blouse and turned. The gasps came slow down her back. Was a landscape of healed burns, rope scars, and welts. She did that to herself. A man muttered. Annabbeth turned her head just enough to speak. "No, he did. The man you still call General. The man who sent Riek to hang me from my own porch because I stole his truth." Silence. "I'm not proud of who I was," she said. "But I won't be ashamed of who I am." She turned back around. Her blouse still open, her chin lifted. "Robert Boone saved my life, and I'm here now to save yours. From silence. From men like my father." Someone stepped forward. Old Mrs. Halder, the widow whose son vanished the same month Dustwater was burned. She looked at Annabbeth, tears in her eyes. "My boy's name." "It's in that book?" Annabbeth nodded. That's when it broke. The crowd shifted. They began to murmur, to move, to see her not as Cwley's daughter, but as someone who'd lived in fire and come out the other side. Sheriff Cwley took the ledgers in his hands, heavy now with meaning. "You'll testify?" he asked. "I already have," she said, as we left the square. I caught sight of a figure in the shadows behind the stable, tall, tense, with a familiar crooked jaw. Clayton Rieck. But this time he didn't raise a hand, he just watched us go. Because he knew the noose had flipped, and this time it was his name tied to the end of it. We returned to the ridge in silence, the horses moving slow under the weight of what we'd left behind. The cabin had changed in our absence. Smoke still curled from the chimney. The wind had knocked loose a shutter. A squirrel had nested in the firewood pile, but the ghosts, they felt quieter now, like they'd been waiting for us to come back and finish what we'd started. Annabbeth stepped down first, walking through the threshold, not like a woman hunted, but like one home. Watched her fingers trail the porch rail, the edge of the beam where the rope had once swung. She paused there, not in fear, in remembrance. She didn't flinch. Instead, she reached up and tied a red ribbon to the nail still jutting out from the beam. "What's that for?" I asked. "A marker," she said softly, "for where I stopped dying. We rebuilt the shelter together, not just hers now, but ours. We widened it into a second room, added a proper roof, patched the walls with fresh-cut pine. I carved her a rocking chair. She'd painted the door with mountain flowers and streaks of ochre and white. We planted rows of potatoes, squash, beans. She insisted on strawberries, too, even though the deer would eat most of them. I didn't argue. The nights grew colder. We shared one fire now, one blanket, one silence that no longer felt like grief. Then came the knock. Not a threat. Not a warning, just a knock, shy, gentle. It was a boy, no older than 10, with a hollow stare and a bloodied knee. Behind him stood a woman, thin, dirty, eyes sunken from too many sleepless nights. They didn't ask permission, just stood there, waiting to see if they were welcome. Annabbeth opened the door wide. They were the first. Over the weeks, others came, a one-eyed trapper who'd lost his hand to bounty men, a mother and daughter who'd fled their ranch when the bank came calling, a preacher who'd once blessed mass graves and couldn't live with himself any more. They didn't ask for much. A place to sleep, a place to work, a place not to be hunted. We gave it. At first I worried about food, about noise, about attention, but it didn't matter. Somehow the mountain made space. The trees seemed to fold around us, keeping watch. The land didn't. It just grew. We built cabins together, dug a well, shared meals over the fire. Annabbeth started teaching the children how to read. I showed them how to track deer without spooking them. One girl brought me a dead bird and asked if I could fix it. "I can't," I told her, "but we can bury it right." And we did. They started calling it the Ridge. No one asked why. The name just settled in like roots. One night, as the first snow dusted the roofs, Annabbeth sat beside me by the fire, her hand in mine, her head on my shoulder. "Do you ever think about leaving?" she asked. "No," I said. "Not even to start over somewhere." "Normal?" "This is normal," I said. "For me, for us." She smiled. "We never married, not legally. No preacher, no papers. Just a vow spoken under stars, whispered with cold hands and hot breath. To stay, to build, to love in stillness. No promises of forever. Just a promise to try. And that, somehow, was enough." It was spring when the letter arrived, hand-delivered by a schoolteacher from down in Dustwater. He rode up on a mule, sunburned and sweating, holding a sealed envelope like it might explode. "Don't know who wrote it," he said, "but it's for you." The paper was rough, The handwriting steady, elegant, unmistakably Annabbeth's, but she hadn't written it for me. The letter was addressed to the new schoolhouse, meant for the children, or maybe for anyone willing to read it. The teacher asked if he could share it at the spring gathering. I nodded. He stood at the head of a long wooden table, surrounded by families, friends, survivors. The fire crackled low behind him as he unfolded the paper and began to read. I was hung once, I was saved once, and I was loved twice. The crowd fell silent. The first man who loved me taught me how to fight. He told me to be strong, to stand tall, to never back down, even if it cost me my soul. He raised me with iron, with pride, and with fear. The second man taught me how to stay. He showed me that peace isn't something you inherit. It's something you build, slow, gentle, stubborn. He never raised his voice, never raised his hand, just raised a place for me. I carry both men in me, but only one remains in my heart. A soft rustle passed through the crowd. Eyes welled. Children leaned in. I used to think love was a battlefield, something you had to win, something that demanded blood or sacrifice or silence. But love isn't possession, or power, or pain. Love is a place, a porch light, a warm bowl, a steady hand when the nightmares come. I write this not as a warning, but as a reminder. If you've been hurt, you're not ruined. If you've been lied to, you're not broken. If you've survived, you're allowed to stay. The teacher paused. No one spoke. He folded the letter and placed it on the table like a relic. I didn't say anything. Didn't need to. Annabbeth sat beside me, her fingers brushing mine beneath the table. Her eyes glistened, not with pain, but with presence. That night, under a half-moon sky, we sat outside the cabin we built from scraps and scars. The ridge had grown quiet again. The children were asleep. The wind carried only pine and the distant creak of the rocking chair Annabbeth loved best. I watched her there, wrapped in the same quilt I'd first given her. Face soft, eyes closed. She looked like peace, not because the past was gone, but because she'd survived it, and chosen what came next. So had I. And in that silence, in that stillness, I finally understood what it meant to start over. Not with fire, not with blood, but with presence. And that was enough. This is the final part. Thanks for riding with us through another tale from the Old West. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. More adventures are waiting on the trail ahead. See you next time.